user will never interact with. Okay. How many of you just don't really know what an agent is? Okay, I'm glad you're being honest. Thank you. Okay, well, an agent is minimally comprised of text. This would be the inputs. Language model, your LLMs. These, if you are familiar with, for instance, ChatGPTs, it's actually an LLM. It's a big, fat, large language model, but it goes somewhere. And the interface is, the place where you put in the text. That's that text medium font. You're not actually using the LLM. You're using an agent built on top of the LLM. And a set of tools. So if you talk to your agent and you ask it to go out and research something for you, it's using a set of tools under the hood to go to the web, to visit, for instance, Google or call one of Google's APIs to return things. It has more and more tools as we move along. Some of them are opt-in, some of them are like get weather. And then, of course, the tool runtime, and that's where I believe Arcade sits. And there are other components that you can add. We'll be talking a bit more about retrieval systems and chat storage, but there are other things that you can bolt on to give your agent extra powers. All right. I personally think of personal agent when I think of an agent. I think of an agent that's doing work for me. I'm thinking of my Claude, which I've bolted so many tools into to allow it to do all kinds of things, like interact with my Notion. I have like a special MCP server for Claude that allows it to go into Notion and read files and write files. And that is how I keep track of all my to-do list items and my write list. It's actually quite nice. Claude has access to the web as well. It has access to my emails. It has access to all of my granola recordings. So I can be like, hey Claude, can you remind me if I've done all the things I need to do from the meetings I had last week? And Claude can figure that out using all the tools I've given it. So that's what I think of when I think of personal agent. But you could have a little agent running in the background at your job. You could have multiple agents running to do things like process new users or reach out to people who are in a support queue, or just to like go and test to make sure your website is running and file issues in GitHub, and then another agent that sees those issues and acts upon them and files pull requests, and another agent that turns that into an update in Slack for an engineer so they can go and review the pull requests. And it's all made possible, mostly by tools. Okay, hierarchy of needs. So retrieval is actually pretty top of the list. We've got prompt orchestration, agent orchestration, and tool calling all the way up here. So one way to think about a tool is that it's essentially a function, and tool calling is the process by which models predict what X is going to be. Tool calling does not necessarily imply execution. Tools minimally consist of a set of inputs. So, in ChatGPT, that would be the text window, and whatever else ChatGPT has access to, all of your history of chats, anything that's being stored in the great memory allocation that OpenAI has added to their ChatGPT. A set of wide potential outputs, a description, and a method of execution. Okay, so the tool definition is the inputs and the outputs. That's you define what you want to get and what you're going to give it, text, image, etc., and what format you want it back in, which is very often for LLMs, something like JSON, just more text. If you're lucky, structured text. So the tool calling process goes like this. Your app, your agent, invokes the LLM with the prompt and its tool definitions. So I'm going to pretend to be the personal agent here. I'm going to be Claude, and you just ask me, what's the weather, Claude? And I get, what I get is I get that question, and I invoke the LLM, the actual, Sonnet 4.5 that's back there. I pass it the text that you input, as well as all the definitions of the tools that are at my disposal. That would be web search, that would be Gmail integrations, that would be all the different things. And one of them might be get weather. And then LLM responds, and it makes a selection. It looks at the text, it sees you want weather, it looks at the tools, and it goes, I could check the web, or I could use this get weather tool, reading the descriptions, check web, and look up anything on the internet. Weather and get weather will return the local weather. It'll return with the selected tool and its predicted parameters. I'm going to use get weather, and I want to see, it's going to say sunny, these temperatures, and the location. That's what I expect you to give me when you do this. Now the agent, Claude, interface, will run the tool with the predicted parameters. It'll invoke the LLM with that prompt and the tool's results. So it sends what's the weather, plus the results that you see. LLM then responds by formulating that into the format you expect to see. In my interface, it's actually quite a bit back and forth. It's not actually just executing a tool. It's deciding which tool to use and passing on the results from that tool to the LLM so it can formulate what it should look like. It's actually quite expensive. Okay, quickly, pop quiz. Can anyone tell me what these two numbers are when they're multiplied against each other? Ah, darn it. I was hoping we had some savants in the audience. We do not. That's okay. It was a trick question. So without tools, you can see that, for instance, O1 mini, it can only be 100% right up to a point. You know, each one of these axes is how many places each of those numbers would be. And when you get over to like 20 places, 20 decimal points, it's not going to give you an accurate result at all. It's a probabilistic model. It's not capable of math. But guess what? If you give it a tool, an actual tool that can do multiplication that it can call, suddenly even GPT 3.5 is 100% accurate up to 20 by 20. So tools really do expand what your LLM, which is not very clever at all. It's just a probabilistic model. It's capable of doing. It just has to pick the right tool. And that is the hard part there. All right. So let's see. In this situation, there was a note here. I'm going to read it. Oh yeah. Good. So LLMs are pretty darn powerful, but notice that each one of these actions involves actually having the ability to access things. Fetching the relevant docs and context needs to have permission to access those things. To use the Q&A queue or access customer support conversations or respond in a chat bot, it has to have permissions to say those things. So it's great to have all these tools, but one of the challenges with them is if a tool doesn't have the permission, if a LLM doesn't have the permissions to access the information necessary to take action, it's not very good at much. And this takes us to one of the reasons why RAG isn't enough. You might say, well, what if we just had a big RAG system? We expanded all the information available to our LLM. So LLMs are based on a set of content they were trained on. So you'll often end up, you ever talk to one of your ChatGPTs or your Claudes, and it seems to think it's like 2023 still. I once had it checking my calendar 2013, and I was like, nobody. You need to get the current date first. I love you, but try harder. But that's one of the problems, is that they have scale knowledge. And one of the solutions to that is we can add a retrieval augmented generation tool to it. Think of it as like a library of information that the LLM can do a little do-si-do with to access even more information. Technically, you could create one with all the local news and the latest news. You can keep checking it, and the weather could be in there. The problem is that this knowledge is stale. Unless it's being indexed constantly, you're going to have to keep updating this RAG. You're still not allowed to take action to update records or things in the database. And there's no business logic or orchestration involved. So if you want to get more than outcomes from your LLM, you're going to need, if you want more than just answers from the crystal ball, you're going to need tools that can behave on your behalf. And that's why ChatGPT just can't send an email on your behalf. So yeah, in order to work for you, agents need to be able to do work as you. It's not enough just to give them access to information. You need to give them the ability to take actions. And that's where user impersonation comes in. They have to have your credentials and be authorized on your behalf to take actions and read and write. And right now in Silicon Valley, there are a lot of really incredible demonstrations of agents, taking action on your behalf. Oh my God, this agent is able to respond to all these calls, etc. But usually these agents are running locally on one person's machine and have a lot of mods built into them to give them access and permissions to do those things there. And so, Bossman says, that's great. Okay, now do it for everyone in this department. And the project completely flops because it turns out to do that, you have to become a real expert in authentication and authorization, which people who build agents and people who build websites, generally nobody wants to be the auth guy in the office. It's a great thing for job security, but you don't want it. I mean, is anybody here the auth person? Has anyone ever had to be the auth person? Nowhere if I speak, notice they are not raising their hands that they're currently the auth person. That's like getting stuck in banner ads. So yeah, you don't want that. And that's one of the challenges that we're running up against now. MCP servers with their tools, it's a way that you can allow agents to have access to all this cool information and take action, etc. But people need to be authorized to do that. So, yeah. Agents these days are stuck in demo mode. They've got no ability to act as the user. LLMs require tools, not APIs. You can't just give an LLM an API, as you saw in that little do-si-do. LLM looks at that API and it's like, what the heck is this? Are you playing with me? Like, that's just a URL. I don't know what to do with that. Anything like that. They need tools, man. Agents need more than tests when it comes to ensuring that they're returning the right thing. And you've got to remember that tool calling doesn't call tools. All right, so this is where my friends in the San Francisco actually sit. They sit in they call it user impersonation, but it's actually more like user authentication. You're basically saying, this is my agent. I have authorized it to behave on my behalf. And people are actively solving for the, this entity is actually an agent representing me. But right now, you personally authorize said entity to be ID'd as you to do things, certain things, not all the things we don't want to do that anyway. So our page, check it out. It's basically when you're running, you can set it up actually to work with Claude or ChatGPT or Cursor, and you can run a number of different MCP tools. And if they require authorization, what happens is you just go pip, it opens up a window, the auth window. You sign in, tell it what you want to allow your agent to do, and there you go. There should be a video here, but I didn't make these slides, so I'm sorry. All you need to know is that it sits between your agent and the MCP servers and handles this authorization on your behalf. Whew. Also, the interesting thing about this company, you should check it out, they authored the pull request number 475 to add native authorization to the Model Context Protocol spec, which, once again, if you're interested in this space, check it out. Specifications for MCP are growing fast. So yeah, it's not enough just to have tools available on a server somewhere and an agent that can call them. You need to have a safe way to allow those agents to authorize, to have access, read-write access to use those tools. Or else you're going to be building all show and no power agents. Anyway, check out, we've got a bunch of different integrations with all your favorite tools. You do not have to wait for ChatGPT/OpenAI or Anthropic to build the integrations that you need. And there's actually a pretty good run-through of a Slack agent built using LangGraph. Right here, if you want to have a peek at how you put together such a thing, the source code is all there. Cool, have fun. Okay. All right, thank you so much. I'm going to hand off to our next person, and it was good to be working with you today.
Thank you, Rachel, for that. Hello? Sorry for that. I think before anybody walked in, Mr. Murphy walked in, and he seems to be everywhere today. That's quite a thing we could handle, Mr. Murphy. Alright, so continuing on the MCP the extension of it is going to be how do we use it in enterprises. So how many of you worked in an enterprise before? Fantastic. Then I'm sure all of you will be aware of the concerns enterprises have in terms of security, in terms of governance, in terms of various tools that can essentially connect, and in some enterprises there's hundreds, if not maybe thousands of tools on a regular basis, varied use cases for different operations that they would essentially do, and how would enterprises deal with this, because they already have an older infrastructure that they're used to. They were amazingly well-made enterprise, if you could use the word. But how does the old infrastructure connect with the new innovations in AI and LLM tech? So that is via MCP. But is MCP scalable? How many MCP servers can we connect? How many of you actually use MCP on a regular basis? Any of you at all? Fantastic. All right, so may I ask, what do you use MCP for? Agentic workflows. Yeah. Anybody using it with coding? Any of you write code? Fantastic. So I'm sure all of you would have integrated a few MCP servers to it, like either GitHub is a bad example, but maybe Context 7 or sequential thinking, etc. How many of you have used a GitHub MCP server before? Okay, I'm sure you could essentially say GitHub MCP server sucks. And it actually uses, GitHub CLI is a better use case than the MCP, but yeah, enough of the rambling. So MCP was introduced by Antler. So before that, my name is Yaswanth. That's my LinkedIn. Currently I'm an entrepreneur in residence at Antler, working on my own agentic AI company, which involves MCP, obviously, and some talk. So the idea is that we know that LLMs essentially think, but they are not very deterministic. They are stochastic in nature. Like there is a probability in which they would essentially answer, right? So MCP essentially allows it to be more deterministic in nature, like Rachel has mentioned. We are aggregated to it. The accuracy close to 100%. Right? So similarly with any other tool calling as well, and if we know all the tools that we use today are pretty much deterministic, we know exactly that if we call this tool, either it will throw an error, we know what kind of error it's going to throw, and we know it's going to give some kind of an output. But LLM, you cannot be sure. It would say 1 plus 1, it might end up being 2, or it might end up saying 11. And that's the problem with LLMs in general. MCP gets that 100% accuracy to it, essentially whenever there are deterministic tools that are connected to it. And then what are the challenges in enterprise? Whether it is scale, in terms of how many tools are going to be connected to an MCP server. If you connect like 100 MCP servers, the answer to that is actually no, because each LLM has a limited amount of context window that is set out for tooling. For example, Pod 4, it has about 24K of tooling, which essentially means that if it gets all the tool descriptions in 25K, and if you add another tool, it will not accept the tool. The main reason for it is that it gets, so one is acceptance because of context window coming off. The second is if you have two tools with a similar name, for example, it might end up being confused. For example, you've connected GitHub and Jira, and it says get an issue. Right? And Jira has issues, GitHub has issues, it might actually be confused. So, what is the right tooling? Which one do I need to use? So, these are the problems with it. And then MCP is a very novel protocol, started off in November last year, and October, November last year, and there have been now 3 iterations to it. I think the 4th iteration is what's being released in July. They've extended a few things, added authentication, etc. to it. They've also added what's called dynamic tooling. We're going to talk about dynamic tooling as well. But dynamic tooling in the MCP is a little different from what I'm going to talk about dynamic tooling here. But let's go through where we are in terms of MCP. Right? So started in November 2025. Then OpenAI ended up giving its support to MCP. So essentially, the MCP servers basically blew up. There are thousands of MCP servers right now. You have a lot of websites where you can essentially download these MCP servers from. So people have been using MCP servers for the last year or so. But the problem here is that somebody gives you an MCP server, you end up downloading it, you don't know if it has malicious code in it. So some of them are open source, some of them are not open source. Right? So what MCP also has started is in the latest one they have announced MCP registries. So MCP registries essentially help you or help an organization maintain a sanitized list of MCP servers one could use, so that way they're a bit more secure. And as Rachel has mentioned, they've added auth to it as well, so that we can connect to enterprise authentication systems, SAML or auth 2, etc. Right? So those are some of the things that have been added in the latest protocol. So if you're downloading an MCP server, it could be not be the latest one. So be mindful of which version it is. So it might support a few things, it might not support a few things. There are different wiring as well. It connects to, so right now there is streamable I/O as well that has been created. So now you could essentially have a remote MCP server. Otherwise, last year you had to actually install the MCP server on your system and essentially run it. Now, what is MCP server? I don't want to take too much time. I think we've heard a lot about it, about connecting it to tools. And MCP has 3 things mainly exposed. One is tools, the other one is resources, and the third one is prompts. Tools essentially give access to tooling. Resources could be anything from documents that you're going to put in, etc., or you could essentially set any data that's specific to an MCP server is usually put in resources. And then there is prompts, where essentially gives you example prompts that the system can use. Now, on top of it, it also has added support for dynamic tooling as well. We'll talk about it in a while. So the whole point with MCP started off is, the question here is, all our systems have got APIs in one way or the other. So why do we need MCP in the first place? Like, when there's an API call, you can make it. So why do you need MCP? Any answers? Sure.
Because on-premise.
Fair enough. Yeah. And I see MCP as just not an API call, or it's not only a tech work, but it's also a product. Right? Because what happens is APIs have been built for applications to connect. Of course, there are LLVs that on its in a single API call, so you end up having multiple API calls, saying maybe there is a user authentication call, then there is a user profile call. Maybe user profile essentially comes from two different places, right? So there's one that just give you your first name, last name. Maybe there's an addresses API that will essentially give you all the addresses that are there. So if you have to get your profile, you might end up actually making 3 different API calls, not a single one. Right? Now, tools in MCP essentially allow you to retransform that into a product. You could just have get profile, and within get profile, the MCP server could essentially add these chain of API calls that you have to make. Right? So you can essentially say get user ID, get user first name, or get username, and then get user addresses. All 3 could be chained, and then that could just be called get user profile. Right? So running an MCP server is just not having a layer on top of your existing API service, but it's also rethinking in terms of how LLMs think, right? and how they should essentially process. And yeah, so as we were talking about MCP in 2025, as we have it, we have what is called dynamic tool registration, which means if there is a change in the MCP server, it has somehow added a new tool or removed an existing tool, LLM would get an update of it. Initially, back in 2024, when it was there, it just connects once, gets all of its tools. But if there is a change in the MCP server, you have to restart your LLM again. But with dynamic tool registration that you have, one could essentially remove an MCP server, replace it with something new, and the LLM essentially would get the data. We also spoke about dual registries, so essentially trying to figure out what are the best MCP servers out there. Are they secure enough? Like just like NPM has. So just like NPM has its own registries, MCPs now have got their own registries as well. So these registries could be global registries, maybe maintained in Antler or Spinnery, etc. They could also be enterprise-specific registries, so that when you're launching an enterprise, you could essentially launch your own registry. Security team could vet all the servers that are going to be put in, and then they end up putting it in the registry itself. So, and then we have the authentication support. Like for example, OAuth style patterns are now added to MCP, so that's corporate authentication and identification could essentially be now. So when we actually have the registries in place, there are multiple challenges that are there. Right? So one is basically authentication, because when an MCP server essentially connects to, say, for example, GitHub, you're just not authenticating with the MCP server, but you're also authenticating with GitHub. You connect your email to it, you're just not authenticating with the MCP email service, but you're also talking about authenticating with the email service itself. Right? So that means when you connect, say, 3 tools, then all the 3 tools have to have their own self-authentication. All the 3 tools could have been completely differently authenticated. Right? So how do you essentially bring that authentication to a centralized space, right? And then, there are also concerns of enterprise has thousands of users, and each user is using which set of tools, right? And do they have permission to use the tools? Say, for example, the user could have a tool, permission to create an issue or a ticket issue, for example, right? But they might not have permissions to delete any issues or update any issues for that matter. Right? So how do you control that? So that's the concern as well. And of course, then there are costs associated with using MCP, because it also takes up space in the context. It essentially also has to do a bit of a round trip to figure out what tools are available to it, etc. So your LLM costs are also going up. But of course, now the LLM is going to perform better with MCP. So hence, the concept of an MCP gateway. So what does an MCP gateway essentially do? Right? So it would take away all these concerns and put it in a centralized space. And so where a corporate governance could essentially configure. You could configure servers, you could configure authentication systems, you could configure observability stack. So instead of connecting the observability, etc., to each of the MCP servers, now what you're doing is you're just doing a centralized space. The second thing that's going to be helpful for MCP is, if you remember, we spoke about the context that essentially is taken away by tooling. Enterprise has hundreds of tools, so you obviously connect hundreds of tools to an LLM gateway, but essentially the context window would essentially run out. Now, what can an MCP gateway do? The MCP gateway could now expose two tools. One is maybe what's a right tool for this particular context. Maybe insecure. Now, by MCP gateway just exposes two tools, it can theoretically connect to hundreds of tools. So that's the premise of an MCP gateway. Then there's an added extra layer of LLM talk as well that the MCP gateway is going to do. So we'll come to that. So the idea is to essentially connect MCP gateway with a RAG model. The RAG database essentially would have all the list of your tools, and when you essentially search for where it will get your top tools that are available, then send a list of the tools to the LLM, and the LLM now will figure out what's best to use. You could have now connected to email accounts, right? It could be a work email account, say that could be your personal email account. So how would LLM know the difference? When you say, hey, send an email to a friend, then it will figure out that the email that you're asking is your personal email address, or send an email to my boss. Then it will essentially figure out that it has to pick up your official email or official email. And so that's the advantage of having the dynamic tool search plus RAG on top of it. Now the whole point is about resilience and scale. And so each MCP server, depending on number of users connected to it, number of users who's going to use it. Obviously, MCP server, each server of its own, so that has to scale in general. So, but then you also have scale in terms of not only tools, but also tenants. For example, as a user, I could have a profile for, I'm an engineering manager in the org, or at the same time, I'm a project manager in the org. So I could have a profile for my engineering management, which could essentially be, go through issues, connect to the code base and things like that. As a project manager, maybe I'll have to update my program document to it, or I'll have to connect my issue tracking system to it. So at any point in time, I could maintain multiple profiles, and each of them could be doing completely different stuff. So the advantage of having it, having MCP gateway will also enable you to maintain these profiles and switch between them as well. So you could essentially have all your configurations put in the MCP gateway itself and configure your personas, etc. The IT team could essentially figure out which persona gets which tooling and provide permissions to it as well. So essentially the idea is also to connect things like telemetry, basically observability, how many users are using, what kind of tooling that they're using, what's the kind of context space that they're taking. And apart from MCP gateway, there are also right now LLM gateways that have come up, the port key, etc. So the advantage of an LLM gateway is that you could connect to any LLM behind the port key, and you wouldn't know. So essentially, the administrator or IT could essentially switch from Gemini to Claude or OpenAI, and the LLM gateways would essentially help you change that. Okay? So, and obviously, just like any other gateway, you could add observability to it. So, for example, Claude exposes hotels, which means you could look at your Prometheus logs and use Kibana, etc., to visualize usage per user, etc. So it's easy for building dashboards as well. So if we talk about a bit of an architecture around it, so the idea is that you have your MCP gateway in between. There is a user and there is an LLM agent who is essentially talking to it. And then you have a tool search and then a back ranker. You have a vector store, which essentially stores all the tooling and connections to it. And then you can also have a bit of a cache in the MCP server itself that could essentially get the data stores from the remote MCP servers or internal MCP servers. So in MCP registries that are public, you would essentially only get MCP servers that would connect to popular systems out there, which are open, those APIs are open. But as people who work in enterprise would be aware that there's a lot of internal tooling for enterprises as well. And there are MCP servers available for it. So the enterprise has to end up writing their own MCP server. So you will have a bunch of internal MCP servers and a bunch of external MCP servers that you will use. Right? So, and then, as soon as you deploy on the registry, that could essentially have a server instance running and then your gateway. And it would just work as any other external MCP server as well. And as I suggested, you can now connect observability to it and add access management to it. So you are now centralizing governance, and you're also centralizing observability. So this is essentially how you would go about designing an MCP gateway. Now, this MCP gateway now could also be extended for other use cases. Right? As I was talking about, you could essentially do a vector search. A vector search would also add another part of you. Right? So, just figure out the best tools that are available, or write the MCP gateway can also improve upon your prompt. So once you have given a prompt, maybe that's not the right prompt. You could have improvisation on it. You could add guardrails to it. So essentially, enterprise might have enterprise policies. So MCP servers might not maintain their enterprise policies. So you want to add a set of guardrails on top of it. And enterprise can essentially connect. So in some cases, maybe you don't set out any email addresses, or if there's any financial data, and so you won't need the financial data or something as a guardrail. So the way I see MCP servers is, or MCP gateway in general, is like we have API gateways for API servers. Now, as an MCP would now come up as another gateway in the enterprise tool chain in general. So going forward, you essentially see these companies coming up there with their own version of MCP servers, MCP gateways. For example, Microsoft has released their own MCP gateway as well. Of course, it's not as advanced as I was mentioning it here, but it just does basic routing around it and a bit of, it handles a bit of off.
So this rack and the vector is just for like your tools.
Yes.
That rack. This is not the rack for application.
This is not rack for
It's very common to elaborate design just for that. I mean, it sounds like that. Not a word to just sort out your
tooling. That's correct. Yeah, the idea is that enterprises would connect hundreds of tools with it. So ideally, finding out the good tools. So you could actually, let's say, that SQL database and tools in it. That's a possibility too. But
is this being used, like as you said, Microsoft, that sounds more like it is being used R and stuff, right? But is this also, like, is this also being used or is it
so this diagram is from what I have done. So right now it is being beta tested. There are 3-4 organizations at the moment and a couple of individuals. So yeah, that's what.
But you see the
Yes, yes. In fact, the idea is also to connect some kind of an enterprise knowledge graph as well to figure out who is a better user for it, if possible, right? Like whether the user has to be user, what's the best tool for that particular user could also be configured. But basically, this is still an evolving tech, so we'll have to figure out what it is. But happy to have your comments so that I can improve my work as well. So please open up and throw your feedbacks.
Yes, so what is embedded into the embedded for us? That doesn't have to question, it would be like future without using.
I don't have an only put in. Yeah, so right now it is just about the pooling information and forms that we are storing in. And if any resources have to be put in, we will essentially put it in the cache.
So there's a cache, like, which part is the cache?
So it could cache the tooling and it could cache the resources and forms as well.
That's we're going to switch the dialogue. But that makes sense.
Yes. So, any more questions on this? Yeah, so the way I'm envisioning it, like, I'm no visionary, but the way I'm envisioning it is just like we have UI and API as an interface layer, LLMs are going to be an intelligence layer on top of it. Right now, I think part of us seen or use on a daily basis, our workflows are pretty much broken. Right? So how do I compose an email? So copy paste the email from your email client, put it in the LLM, asking to give a reply. Or you type in a reply and then you copy that reply and then paste it to the email client and send it. I think that's going to change. Your email is just going to be like, you just talk to an agent and the agent will inform you saying that, hey, you've got a Slack message from your boss. There is a Slack message in social, so you'll be muted because your calendar says that you will have some calm hours. So it's now going to evolve into it, and I think LLMs have already started coming in mobile phones already, which is started automating some of our work in terms of email and calendar. But I think that's going to evolve very, very soon, and enterprises are also going to adopt them so that people do smart work and LLMs will do all the grunt work. So this is what I would call as an organization maturity model, moving from manual processes to automated to AI assisted, which is basically what we call as loop, and then semi-autonomous agents, right, like oversight and guardrails. But I think very soon we are also going to see a fully agentic enterprise. I'm definitely very, very positive about it. And I would also take the next step forward, and I would also say these agentic folks also would become sovereign in nature. So that means the board of directors would also be LLM agents that we were talking about. Whether the regulations or rules and law allows it or not, we have yet to see, but I'm sure there are plus countries in the world, some of them are going to have less stringent regulations. So we will definitely see agentic laws coming up, and right now agents and say, for example, to tools and AI essentially is doing billions of dollars of trading already on the stock market. So why can't they do corporate governance as well? So, my name for a fully agentic enterprise is what we call as mnemonic agents or mnemonic bots. So which is going to be very wise odds if that's what we're going to call it. So the idea is to move from intelligence to wisdom. So yeah, how would you roll out in an enterprise? Pilot with a few tools, add a couple of them, check out how your demo users are taking them, do they find use cases, which is a benefit. Then, put in your registries, which are essentially safe and covered with observability. And then once you are essentially confident about the whole thing, then you could start doing write access for it. How many of you have used LLMs and they're just deleting data? Delete? No? So there are all sorts of scary stories where LLMs would end up deleting your production database or something else and say, and they also end up lying and saying, hey, I didn't delete it, somebody else did. Like, no, you deleted it. Oh, I'm sorry, I deleted it. Oops, I don't know what to do now. Right? So, but then enterprises cannot take that risk. So how do we put in guardrails around it? For example, my code has been very notorious of not listening to guardrails. So we'll have to see how that problem could be tackled in the end process. So that's where we're going to head.
That's why you have classification in production.
Hopefully, I think that's going to happen in our lifetime. I think in this decade, definitely in this decade for sure. So we will get there. Hopefully there'll be signals, 50 or something, and we should definitely need to talk about it. All right, so then you essentially end up measuring your success metrics. So which is basically how successful have people at times, whether your users have given a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Right? And what is your mean time resolution? How many policies have been added? If you have seen none of them are above 90%, that's because you chain elements together, their success rate is most high, like 95%, maybe 5 times you've chained it, and it just comes out to 7%. So so these are definitely some of the problems. So the way forward is standardize, govern, and scale. I would say like in three terms, but obviously all of us who work in enterprise knows how difficult the notorious enterprises are to standardize, govern, and then scale. But hopefully that's going to happen. So that's the talk right now. Happy to answer any questions. Yes, please.
Next, so your use of the InterDB for managing the sorting tools piqued my interest. How many tools on average are your use cases?
So my personal use case is I connect about 10 different tools. But my enterprises right now have started automating their email and calendar. They're also using it for document searches and such. So one use case is accounting setup. So they have emails, they have calendars, they have documents that they're analyzing. Then there are also accounting systems that are essentially and use 2-3 different accounting systems for different use cases. Each of them are also multi-connected. So, and these accounting systems are quite complex, from as simple as put a ledger entry to create a new company to, if you look at, say, for example, Microsoft Dynamics, I think the Swagger file itself has about 180 or 200 API endpoints. Even if you productize all of it properly, you can about 100 different things. Right? So, the number of tools definitely will increase as we speak.
you briefly growing context, do you have any particular challenges that you using methodologies to make more context?
Compact context. The short answer to that is no. But yeah, compaction, I've seen it in Quad code. But codex, I have not come across it. But I'm not an expert in LLMs and context. Any questions? Cool. So that.
It's about resilient agentic system, how or does the philosophy of the apps?
So
How important is the philosophy really a resilient system?
interpreter.
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 Like why is more
I'm sorry. I have a little bit of hearing.
I'm sorry, I didn't say clear that interpreter a little more what is this that
Reasoning.
it could be 70%
Yes, I'm not able to answer that. Any more questions? Alright, so that brings us to the end of the talk. So surprise, surprise, I think Murphy also came in for the talk. Her speaker is dropped off. So this is I'm so sorry for that. I was actually looking for that. So yeah, so that gives us extra 20 minutes, and we can finish off the pizzas that are there, or we could go to the clear arms next door, or I could do. So all of you are welcome to join us.
So you carry on.
No, carry on.
Watch the movie. Watch the movie. You have to be that.
Otherwise, I think the floor is open for discussion. If anybody wants to come and speak about their experiences with LLMs, that would be great. Or start a discussion in general. That's fine. Cool. So as I said, our venue closes at 9 p.m. So we've asked, so I think we have about 70 more minutes to socialize and we will take that to the park. Thank you so much for coming in today. Apologies for all the hiccups that we went through. We'll be announcing the next set of event very shortly. So please watch out for our space as well on our Rigour or Meetup, video dates on the event.